Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Now you might be wondering, okay, the turn's already been submitted, which it has, yes, the turn has been submitted, and in fact this save is now technically out of date, but obviously this is the most recent save. So you might be wondering, what am I intending to do here today? What I'm intending to do here today is just give a brief outline, give like a general explanation of what we're doing here at the moment. I think it's probably quite a good idea, is every now and then, like, I'll do sort of a overview video, and then at least for those of you who are not religiously watching the live streams, at least you're like in the know as such. So, the main thing that we spoke about in the last session here is really the use of the Kitabutai. So the Kitabutai is going to be making its way, well in fact, let's see here. There we go, okay. So the Kitabutai is going to be heading to this position over here. Now the reason for this, it's going to take about 2 turns to get there. We should be around about here by the next turn. But our true position is over here. The reason being, I'm going to launch a strike over at Brisbane. Now we did debate, and I did debate with myself as well actually, as to whether to turn south to hit the more industrial targets to the south, such as Sydney and Melbourne. But the reason why we're in fact not doing that is I've got really what I call the northern plan and the southern plan here in this area. So this area is obviously the north, and then of course we have the south here. Now I've chosen the northern plan, but I'm going to go through the reasons as to why. There's a lot in the south, I'm not going to lie. There's a lot in the south in terms of targets. Though something that we do have to bear in mind here is the fact that our opponent, the historical gamer, he's seen the Kitabutai off the coast of Australia beforehand, and look at how he reacted. He reacted by sending raids of cruisers and other warships to these areas. This is behaviour that we've seen now become almost common. We do see it actually playing out once again, as we do see ships over here to the north. Now, in terms of targets, there are plenty of targets here, such as Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. These cities over here, even just Brisbane and Sydney, would present a lot of opportunity for us to actually score VP, as obviously we'd be able to hit the industrial centres there and cause a little bit of an issue over here. Now, see, the thing is with the Allies receive, they don't have production like we do. So islands such as New Zealand, for example, does not produce fuel. But the thing about New Zealand is, and what makes New Zealand very important, is the fact that the industry here can of course produce supply. Now supply is key in the Allied war plans. He's going to need this supply. The reason for that is this island will obviously generate additional supply that's not just coming in from the US, etc, etc. Predetermined really, off-map supply. But this is actually on-map supply. So what he can do with this is he can pick this up and take it whatever the hell he likes. Now, I do believe this applies to Australia as well, and the fact that New Zealand doesn't produce fuel. I don't believe Australia produces fuel naturally. Now, I could be wrong there. There might be some source of fuel in Australia. I wouldn't know really. But we know that he is moving fuel down to Australia via the shipping lane here from Perth to Java. At least that's what I'm going to surmise. We have seen tankers, we have seen cargo ships in this area. It would make the most sense that he's heading to the area as far away from our own forces as possible. But the reason for our operations in this area is due to the fact that he has to move fuel here for this to be of any use. And the same applies to Australia, if it doesn't produce its own fuel or not of enough of its own fuel. These areas over here of all this industry are going to starve without that fuel. So that means that if he wants to have access to those supplies, to those resources really, he's going to have to move fuel into that area. Now, the reason behind the invasion of New Caledonia, and the seizure of the Coral Sea in its almost totality at this moment in time, is we will look towards actually securing a position here. I'm going to, at the moment I've got an airfield over here at Luganville. Obviously in the next few turns, once this airfield is sized to I can begin to really expand on the usage of my air power in this area. But I'll be doing the same thing over here at Noumea, and I will be looking at taking control of Lord Howe, Norfolk, and Raoul Islands. The reason is, with these islands over here, as well as that of Noumea, New Caledonia, and Luganville in general, I will be able to start to project air power down this way, especially if I could take Raoul Island and build something up on Raoul Island. It is capable of taking an airfield, only size 1 airfield, so it wouldn't ever be able to do terribly much other than just be really a base for reconnoitering the area. But it would actually cause some issues, as obviously I would be aware of the ins and outs and use it to coordinate submarine strikes. Now, the reason that we will be looking towards Fiji is pretty much to cement our position in this area. If I am to seize these islands over here, it very much becomes difficult for him to move the fuel down into this area. I'm trying to explain this, and I feel like I'm explaining it badly, but I'm hoping that you guys get the general idea. Basically, we are looking to actually isolate Australia and New Zealand from the USA. I'm looking to isolate the convoys from New Zealand and Australia. And by taking control of the Coral Sea and the area around Fiji, the Fiji area in general, I'm hoping to actually establish a position through which, through the use of minimal force in terms of garrisons, I'm never going to garrison these islands too heavily. For example, eventually when we do look at the campaign against Fiji, which is to come in the near future, we can see here that this is all jungle. But the fact is, it is theoretically possible. I do believe one could land at these hexes on the actual island. Of course, that isn't going to go down very well. It's going to be a bit of a difficult circumstance, as the fact is you just land in on the side of a cliff, basically. You know what I mean? But there's nothing really suitable there for an invasion. Whereas obviously these bases here at Nardi and Suva have their own ports and airfields. Basically, it's established and pre-existing infrastructure. But the thing is, and the actual danger to Fiji is the fact that it has 2 bases. And that is going to be its ultimate downfall. For example, over here at New Caledonia, we've been able to observe our campaign here. We landed, of course, we landed at Comac. Unfortunately, we weren't able to take the base immediately. But when we did launch our attack, it was successful in the first time. And we did secure the base. Now, that gave us a foothold over here on the north end of the island. And of course, we did move down here to Lafoa, which does obviously give us the beachhead that we needed. So the fall of New Caledonia is going to be due to the fact that these points here were not actually defended. Comac was, of course. But obviously, the mainstay of enemy forces on the island are in Noumea. Which, fair enough, that means Noumea is going to be harder to take. But once the island has an established Japanese beachhead, it just means I can move supplies in there, I can move more men in there, and he can't repulse that. And this is going to be the reason why Fiji will fall in the end. He's going to have to split his defences. But the thing is, how is he going to split the defences? Is he going to have an equal amount of men at Nardi or at Suva? I sincerely doubt that. I always do believe that he will have a lesser garrison at Nardi. But we shall see. I'm getting a little bit off topic here. But these islands represent really our greatest... Yeah, in general, New Caledonia, these islands here, and of course these islands over here. They really do present the best opportunity I have here to effectively cut the supply line from the US to New Zealand and Australia. A secondary reason as to why, this all ties into the Northern Plan, by the way, I'm going to get into that one in a few moments. But this, I believe, will have him launch an offensive in this area. And through that, I'm hoping to actually make use of the multiple island air bases to actually be able to conduct ground-based airstrikes against his forces. Now, just bear that in mind. As obviously, he will come. He's going to be reluctant, but he will come. So the reason as to why, another reason as to why I'm not going to go south here, is the fact of distance. If I take a look over here then, so if I was to be in position to strike against Melbourne, which is roughly about there, that would place me 43 hexes away from Port Moresby. It would place me 65 hexes away from Truk. That's a couple days of sail. That's quite some distance there. And we've seen previously in the past that when the Kidabutai is sufficiently far away from this area, he will launch carriage strikes. He will launch cruiser raids. We've seen this. It is a pattern of behaviour that we've been able to observe, and really, almost, I suppose we could predict it at this point in time. So what I'm going to be doing here by the northern plan is I'm going to obviously strike at Brisbane and then turn north. I'm hoping he will not actually suspect the turn to the north as much as he would expect a turn to the south. Obviously there's more of a target-rich environment to the south we could presume. Now by turning to the north, we do also gain another benefit. The benefit is obviously proximity to the rest of the Japanese Empire's possessions, especially the Marshalls, especially Truk, all these islands over here, would actually close to our possessions. We'd only be a few days as opposed to maybe like a week or 2 weeks away. Now another reason for turning north is, of course it might present something of a surprise to him, but what I want to go over here then is just a comparison of infrastructure on Australia in the south versus that of the north. So if we take a look at the road network, we can see here that there's a lot of high density road network along the coastline. Pretty much 99% high density road network across that coastline there. And to the north it is mostly high density, but we do see areas where there is of course lower density roads. Especially over here to the north, the density does decrease. Now, that is quite important, as obviously it does mean he can move forces up and down the coastline. But it's not so much the roads that we need to worry about, it's in fact the rails. Now as you can see here, we do have high density rail lines over here. This is obviously lesser density, but this is high density rail lines. This means he can transport his air groups, for example, from each of these bases through the use of rail lines. So the issue is, even if we were to attack the airfields, he could quite simply move his forces via the rail lines to other air bases in a pretty quick time there. Wouldn't take him very long to do that. However, in the north, as you can see here, the density of rail is significantly lower. And to the point over here in the far north, the rail is non-existent. You can see here this density is lower. I do believe this would affect his ability to move. I think it might even take him longer to move assets up the coastline. So what I'm hoping to do here then, is as we make our way north, he's going to be forced to actually fly his air power into these air bases. So the good reason for that, at least for us, the good part of that for us is the fact that I could actually then potentially even hit these air bases or challenge his his air forces in the field. And he's not going to be able to simply move them in or out or protect them as easily, or reinforce them as easily. He's going to be more likely to take damage. There is a number of high-level airfields to the south. Over here we do see some decent airfields. Another one over here. 3 over there is quite large. Yep, 1. Another 3 here. And a 2 there. And a 1, okay. So you can see here that there's Rockhampton. Right, there we go. So we can see here that he has really 3 main air bases to the north over here. To the south, obviously, that number is significantly higher. So these air bases over here are the ones that we do need to worry about. But obviously due to the lower nature of the actual, lower density nature of the rail lines, of the roads, that sort of thing for the most part. Not so much the roads, but definitely the rail. I think we'd be able to treat these as not quite isolated bases, but the distance between these bases is greater, theoretically. If it is indeed the density of the rail decreases it increases the amount of travel time. So as we move north at great speed, his assets are going to struggle. He's going to have to fly them, which means they're subject to fatigue, they're subject to operational losses, and subject to damage. So I believe by moving north, we're going to be facing a lesser threat from the air, which is good. I'm hoping as well that potentially we may come across shipping to the north here. I think by moving north, ideally it will be unexpected. Now, going into further rationale behind the northern plan. At the moment, we have just secured Rabal over here. The division over here at Rabal must be moving quickly. At the moment, I'm favouring moving our forces via sea, obviously, to Buna, and then having them march across and via land march into Port Moresby. The reason why I've been considering this plan is due to the fact that I don't know what's in the area. I don't know what sort of threat we could be looking at. We don't know how strong Port Moresby is. So if the Kidabutai does move to the north, we'll be able to get an idea how strong the defences of Port Moresby are. I would be able to actually be quite bold in this area. I don't want to tie down the Kidabutai escorting convoys, basically. So I want the Kidabutai to move to the north, ideally eliminate anything in the area. And really, we'll take a look at his defences and potentially even consider softening up the defences, or really just see how strong they are. Because if the Kidabutai is rampaging in this area, we're not going to see any enemy reprisals, we're not going to see any reinforcement of Port Moresby. And that is what I'm expecting in the next couple of days. If he's not already reinforced Port Moresby, I imagine he will be doing so shortly. Port Moresby is a very, very good asset. We have a large airfield there. That port could be built up, but the airfield could could be exponentially enlarged, which is very nice. You can see there quite a few VP points there for Port Moresby. So we do need to secure that. This would really help to cement our control of the Solomon Sea and of the Coral Sea. Most definitely. As you can see here, base there at Port Moresby, a base over here at Rabal, Buen, Tulagi, obviously Luganville, and New Caledonia to the south. It does effectively mean I have something of an interior line. I have the forward operational bases at Port Moresby. When in reality, I could keep aviation engineers, I could keep some AA potentially, but I could basically keep the bases ticking on by. And I could actually, in fact, keep the vast majority of my air power back at Rabal, back at the Shortlands, back at Tulagi, that sort of thing, basically Guadalcanal. And then when we do spot enemy forces or when the airbase is under threat, we'd be able to move assets up from these second line bases to the front line. Basically protect our own air power and be able to shepherd it to where we need it, really. Now, a further reason as to why I choose the northern plan is of course that we are moving along the coast of northern Australia where the density of rail is lower, the density of air bases is lower, ideally the amount of resistance is lower, and the amount of potential success is higher. We move closer to Port Moresby so we can take a look at the defences there, work out our strategy for taking it. We can clear the area, ideally soften up the defences of Port Moresby if it is indeed worthwhile. We'll also be closer to our own possession, so it is likely that in the event of a carrier attack we'll be more able to respond to such attacks. Luganville will be able to look after itself shortly. At the moment we have H6K4s there, and we have a squadron of KI-431Cs looking after the area. When that airfield does increase, and obviously once New Mayor has been seized, I will be able to take a look at actually moving down naval bombers in that area. And now we might lose a couple of naval bombers, but the thing is, it's going to be difficult for him, because unless he's actually using carriers, basically, unless he's going to commit air strength down to that area, his ships are pretty much vulnerable. They might shoot down a couple of the bombers, but at the end of the day, if they do land a torpedo into the side of his warship is, it's kind of buggered. So that is very much and very effectively going to shut down a lot of his operations in that area for quite some time, really. Unless he brings carriers, unless he brings air power. And it's an interesting case, really. As we escalate, and if he in turn escalates the situation in the South Pacific, we stand to benefit. Because in reality, if he's bringing assets down into this area over here, down to an area where we do have control of a number of islands nearby, and the number of islands will increase, it really is going to be playing into my doctrine of how I am going to use my carriers. I'm not going to be using my carriers beyond a certain point, for example. I spoke about this a few times, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a brick wall that the Kidabutai will not cross. The reason for that is I'm not going to engage him in his home waters, basically this area here. If we engage him in this area here, we are basically doomed. It's very likely he'll be able to coordinate a large amount of force for moving into areas that we have no reconnaissance of. We have no information, we have no friendly bases. We're very distant from our own bases, he's very close to his own bases, and it's not going to work out well. However, if I can force American engagement in this sort of area, now, ideally, I'd like it to be in this area here, when I could support my Kidabutai from land-based squadrons. Ideally, I want the land-based squadrons to be doing the heavy lifting. I want those guys with the ones that go in there and take the brunt of the damage, really. Japan's carrier aircraft are precious, and especially the pilots are precious, really. I don't want to lose the pilots with the experience. Then I, of course, do not want to lose my fleet carriers. So I'm hoping that if we do take control of this area, and through the result of, obviously, all of our activity in this area, I'm hoping to ultimately engineer something of a battle in this area. But we're not going to see a Midway situation. Obviously, Midway is under our control. But for example, when it came to Midway, obviously the Japanese were moving in onto Midway. Obviously, they did that in very half-arsed fashion, basically have different forces doing different things, not moving as a single body, really. We did obviously see the fact that the Americans were able to completely and utterly destroy the Japanese in this area, shatter their carrier strength. Now, obviously, that was due to the fact that they did have Midway Island to use. Obviously, they were able to use their air assets from the island, obviously coordinate with the island. I want to do the same, and I want to do it in a much greater fashion. I'm not saying he will do this, but I think if he did, it would be quite so in our favour. Now, another reason for heading to the north is I do need to head back to track with Kidabutai. The Kidabutai does need new aircraft. She needs to have her replacements aboard. But also, if we take a look at the actual state of the aircraft, the amount of fatigue is increasing on these aircraft. I can't keep this up forever. The ships themselves are not going to receive any... I might see what sort of repairs I could potentially carry out on some of the ships here. But major damage can't be repaired. But system damage potentially so. But it is going to take time. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the carriers will undergo full repairs when their upgrades are due. So at least they'll upgrade and of course be repaired at the same time, but they will have to head back to Japan. So I think in the time being, I can't afford to not have the Kidabutai ready, really. Now, another aspect of our strategy here at the moment is as of this turn, moved. Indeed, I've moved H6K4s over to the island of Wake and Midway. The reason being that from Midway, for example, running our H6K4s at 20 hexes, we're only 1 hex out of range of Johnson Island. Of course, we are a few hexes out from the Hawaiian Islands. But for example, I can cover the French Frigate Island. Basically, we're able to cover this area very effectively. And of course, over here from Wake, we're able to cover out to around about this area here. So that means that I'm actually going to be able to make use of these 2 islands over here as observation posts. Now, the greatest aspect of having Midway Awake operating as a search base is what I'm intending to do here. At the moment, I do have 9 H6K4s over here at Bihoro since move this turn. I'm looking to actually relocate them to Paramishiro Jima. Or Paramishiro Jima, however the hell it's pronounced. The reason for that is, for example, Midway is 44 hexes away. Now, imagine each squadron is flying 20 hexes there. I could in theory cover the vast majority of the ocean here. And in theory, anything moving towards Japan, I would have a chance to detect it. Now, as you can imagine, if we were able to take control of Atu Island, or basically any part of the Illusion Islands, and set them up as a patrol base, in theory, I could actually cover the northern area of the Pacific here with search aircraft very effectively. And in so doing, if he knows that he can't move through this area, he's going to be more likely to move through this area when he has, obviously, his supporting assets. As a strike through this area, he's going to be noticed and therefore prepared for. So indeed. I know I've gone really off topic. I'm really bad at this sort of thing. I always do tend to go off topic. But I hope you guys have a little bit more of an idea as to what we're doing here in the actual campaign at the moment. We are coming close to the end of our first operation here. Now, originally the operation was intended to land at Fiji, but it did radically change. We made our way down here. The carriers were spotted around about this point here. We since moved in. We took Luganville, and then it did take some time for us to take New Caledonia. Now, New Caledonia is measured in days at this point here. Our forces of the Empire, a few, I don't know, maybe a day or 2 out here at the moment in time. It's going to take us about a week to take New Maya. I'm saying about a week here because I'm expecting something in the region of level 2 to level 3 fortifications. And I don't know what sort of forces we might encounter. I don't know what their supply state is. But I'm going to take my time there. The beauty is, for example, I do have the 2nd Field Artillery Regiment. Now, unfortunately, I do wish I had more Field Artillery Regiments. But what I intend to do here is basically have these 23 guns just bombard the enemy. Each time I bombard his position in Noumea, it forces him to counter battery fire, and basically he's going to be using supply. He will produce a small amount of supply here depending on how many resources he has, but it will force him to use some supply. So what we're going to do here then is basically bombard, figure out the strength of his forces, and try to drain them of supply. I'm hoping by actually attacking the base at Noumea, we might be able to cause a reaction here as well. We're only a few days out from having a larger airfield at Luganville. So that's quite good. Now, I have begun the process of moving aviation engineers from Luganville to this island over here at Funafuti. What I'm going to be doing as well is, once they are over here in totality, is I'm going to begin to move engineers down here to survive. Once I have engineers down there to survive, flown in via aircraft, I'm going to be looking at obviously stationing patrol aircraft in this area here. Now, it's interesting really. We took survive really by a fluke. It was very lucky. But it will come in handy. These islands, such as Canton Island, they're going to receive new importance in the months to come. I do especially believe that Canton Island will do so. Potentially even Baker Island. These islands that already do have airfields are very, very useful. Especially Canton. Canton's very handy. See, through Canton, let's take a look at the range here. Through Canton, we could operate H6Ks, and we'd only be 2 hexes out of detection range here. I could, of course, increase it to 22, 23, 24, 25, and obviously cover the entire island chain. But obviously we are going to be looking after aircraft, so probably not. But obviously having another position here at Canton, positions at Midway and Wake, Paramishiro, Jima, New Caledonia, Luganville, this area here, this area here. And in fact, what I'm looking to do here then is really just develop the Japanese network for detection, really. The way we're going to fight this war is, for something such as the Pacific War, which is primarily about naval assets, our doctrine is going to be primarily land-based. Each of these islands is a castle in isolation. And by controlling a series of these castles and interlinking them together, basically using them so that the whole is greater than the individual, we'll be able to fight him. Even with inferior numbers, even with inferior equipment, we will be able to fight an asymmetric battle against a superior opponent. Ideally conserving our own strength for the battles to come later on, well, basically later on in the war. Indeed. So, I know it's been very much off topic. I do hope you guys have enjoyed this. I think I might do these more often every now and then. I suppose it's something of a way for you guys to actually just get into like my rationale, my reasoning, my thoughts, my hopes, my dreams, my fears. It's been fun. It gives me an excuse to pander on, doesn't it? Well, to ramble on. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. So until next time, thank you for watching. And if you are interested in supporting myself in the series, the best thing to do here is actually become a patron of mine. Definitely helps me out. Helps me buy more books, and helps me keep doing this. Thank you, and goodbye. Tenno, Haika, Banzai!